Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 5Marks podcast plus one. Welcome, everybody. This is again the 5 Mark podcast. I am your host, the Sem, and this month, the May month, is the mental health month. So we're talking about mental health with guests, with special people, and today there's no one that could be more special than our next guest. But before that, we present my dear Mark friends. We have Mr. 115, Martin.
That's me. I'm back again.
And with no introduction, Carmo. Hi, Carmo.
How we doing, everybody? Welcome back for another week.
It's not just me bullying you.
and again, I'm your host, always weird, the Sam. But ladies and gentlemen, let's not waste any more time because this month is very important for us, and we really want to start with a person that has made Irish wrestling what it is today. He is the brain and the power behind OTT wrestling. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Cabray. Hello, Joe.
How are you all?
Hell of an intro.
Hi.
Yeah, was a hell of an intro. I owe you money for that, Sam.
That's how we have to start. So before we start with the actual questions, this is a little disclaimer. May is Mental Health Month, and with this podcast, we're trying to talk to people that are in need, that are not feeling their best. We're sharing stories. I shared my personal stories in my personal story in the, a few episodes ago. I've been talking about my ADHD and how I take positivity of that ADHD, and some methods I personally cope with all of these challenges. And my plan going forwards is to talk to people and shed a bit of light in their ways to cope with the chaos that the wrestling life is, but in general, what adult life really is. So let's start with the questions, if everyone is okay with it. The first question is a really important question that I like to ask to people. And that question is, how are you? How are you, Joe?
Everyone, I'm good. I'm great. Yeah. Nice. It's a nice day out. So yeah. No, it's not raining.
But how are you really?
I'm great. I really am great.
You're really great. That's great to hear. And actually, it's sunny here in Ireland, so that's a more of a
that's a major boost for everybody.
Yeah, it's a major boost for everybody. So let's start talking about something. We were talking about OTT. You are the brain behind OTT. How is owning a wrestling company? Enlighten us about the whole process of owning a wrestling company.
It has its ups and downs, like it has its goods and its bads, like all jobs. But yeah, you just kind of have to dedicate a full 6-7 hours a day to making sure that everything is kind of taken over, and you're planning your future events and directions of the company and stuff like that. So it can be challenging. It's probably more challenging than other forms of entertainment because you have the added stress of injuries and stuff like that, and people having to pull out and last minute changes. So having to kind of learn how to cope with those issues has been a massive kind of challenge that I've overcome over the years, because you have a vision, you put so much into it, and then sometimes it just doesn't come to fruition, which can be quite frustrating. So yeah, but I mean, as I said, then to see people kind of establish themselves, like to see Jordan Devlin, from coming back to Irish wrestling, then making it to where he is now, and same with Valkyrie and even Walter, to kind of see these guys and girls kind of reach those limits. Session as well is kind of really rewarding. So has like everything, it's ups and downs.
Hi. How do you say that? Remember that my language barrier is always a funny topic of conversation. So every now and then I will stop for a second and my brain will buffer. So please get used to that. And no, what I was saying is it high risks, high reward? Could that be it? That's what I was finding.
Yeah, as I said, yeah, you kind of invest money into, I think the Scrappermania show is a perfect example of like high risk, high reward. I mean, there was a lot of
Hmm.
risk, and if,
Yeah.
unfortunately some things happened that were out of our control, but you gotta roll with it. And at the end of it, we still kind of pulled off a really amazing weekend. But there's some of the challenges, there's some of the heartbreak that goes along with kind of doing pro wrestling. It's a funny one, but I've been doing it since forever. I've been doing it nearly 20 years, you know.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah.
I'll just stop for a second about something you said, which is coping, coping with all of the stress and all of the ups and downs. And have you found during all these 20 years something that helps you cope with all of the stress and the travel and more so because for a great deal of OTT's existence, you were running it by yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I still am kind of running it mostly by myself.
Yeah. So with the booking, the planning, and the talking with people, organizing the show, um, what is it your go-to in regards of coping mechanisms with stress, with the whole chaos that is actually creating a wrestling show?
So I got myself a dog about a year ago. It was one of the best things. I've always had dogs, but I haven't had a dog in a while. So I got myself a dog. That's a blessing, Sometimes if you're kind of feeling stressed, like today I was a bit stressed, so I just got up and I put my dog in the car and we went to the park and we, just let him off the lead and just let him run crazy. But yeah, my dog, I meditate a lot to kind of deal. One of my major things is that I think a lot of people have this. I can't switch off.
Yeah.
So, it kind of, and I
Mhm.
think everyone kind of has that to an extent. So being able to find a way that will preoccupy your mind and, I kind of find like I'm lucky to live close to the Phoenix Park in Dublin, um, which is just, I think it's one of the biggest parks in Europe. So just to be able to uh, kind of walk around there for an hour, it's kind of meditative. You're not focused on anything, there's nothing to distract you. So yeah, the dog has been a real thing.
A
Um,
real coping mechanism.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then as well, I suppose just being surrounded by good people. Like I love going down to the School of Irish Wrestling, because it's such a young collective people with energy that I can kind of feed off as well. So
Mhm.
those are the things that I kind of help me deal with some of the stress of it all, and food,
Just at the
chocolate.
and food.
Oh,
Chocolate. Oh wow. Oh wow, this is incredible.
Would be
Joe
rich if it wasn't for
admitting
chocolate.
admitting
all the people
those
listening now
dopamine
going, he
spikes.
eats chocolate and looks like that.
That's incredible.
Oh my
That's
god.
incredible. Shocking revelations. Yeah, I suppose so. A lot of different people have their own, different coping mechanisms, and having a dog as a coping mechanism is pretty new for me personally. But it's actually it's very cool. On the topic of meditation, I know a good few people that um, are it's very difficult once you're passionate about something and once it's more so in creative environments. It's difficult to fully switch your brain off. You have to think about shows and creative and ideas, and if you get inspired in a moment, you cannot say, oh no, I'll think about that later, because the idea just goes away. um so we talked about being the owner of OTT, but what's how would you compare being the brain behind OTT to being a performer, to being, to traveling around and being in the mix yourself? Is that very different on your brain and on your stress levels?
I would say the promoting aspect is a lot more stressful. I think with wrestling shows, you kind of just have to show up and hope that you can put together a good match, and the promoter that's paying you is happy, and the fans that are watching you are happy. I never, I got nervous, I suppose, before wrestling matches, but never stressed about. I suppose when I traveled, sometimes I'd find it stressful having to travel a lot, because many years ago I was away at least 2 or 3 times a week. Sorry, a month, traveling on flights, which is just it gets a little bit stressful after a while. But yeah, I suppose the promoting aspect has been a lot more of a stressor, I suppose, than wrestling. That's me personally. Some people could find the wrestling aspect a lot more stressful.
Can I ask there as well, because there's a clip a while ago of Paul Heyman saying this to Mark Dallas, because obviously Paul and Mark both promoters themselves, like if someone misses a cue or if the music just doesn't go off right or something happens, and do you ever just get that, oh god damn it, why that guy had one job, oh now it's all ruined?
Ask Sem every day. It's like one fucking job. Yeah, and it can be, but I mean, at the end of the day as well, like a coping mechanism is like nobody's looking at this and saying, I'm going to purposely mess this up. Everyone's trying to do their best. You know what I mean? But sometimes it's you've given too much responsibility to somebody that's it's just beyond them. Or but as I said, and I always say this to people who are getting frustrated in wrestling, because wrestling's, it's predetermined. So things go wrong, but nobody's purposely trying to go out there and mess things up. It just happens sometimes. You know what I mean? And I like in the heat of the moment, I think it's good to kind of reflect upon that. I mean, like, they're not intentionally trying to, mess up the show, but yeah, it does. I mean, I would say every show there's at least one issue where there was one really simplistic job and someone just misses the cue or it just doesn't happen, and it's just like, what the.
I just have,
what the fuck?
I have 2 funny stories as well just about that. Like, I remember for Homecoming, it was the Social League against Trent and Manic Reese, and there was a spot where Matthew kind of jumped over and he caught his feet in the ropes, and he came on here. I was like, oh yeah, that was so bad. And I went, no, that was an accident. I said, I thought you were protecting the crowd because none of the crowd moved. He goes, oh yeah, that's a good way to look at this. I was like, there you go. But then myself and there's another Mark, Emmett, we went to Road to the Top, and Sammy came out, and we thought it was a brand new version of his theme song, Crawl. So the 2 of us are, yeah, this is great. Went to Sammy at Hard Knocks next day. He's like, Sammy, where did you get that remix from? He goes, remix? Your man just fucked up the song. Like, that was all it was.
That's like, so for instance, like when Sam came out, there was no the sound guy unfortunately just didn't do a test of the sound, or else he had done a test and in the meantime a lead had been changed. And you're doing a live show and you realize that the sound is not coming out the speakers properly. It was something to do with the leads. So then you kind of have like tech guys running around trying to find leads that should have been, done 3 hours before the show. But these are the things that happen, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. At the same point, that guy isn't sitting there going,
that's grand.
It is what it is now. Yeah, it's obviously just something he just kind of, did it anger me? I wanted to kill someone, but like, what do you do,
Wow. Returning back about on the wrestling topic. Now you said lots of people, in the wrestling business, stuff can happen, stuff can change. But there's one specific question that I want to make in regards to wrestling, and it's the pressure in wrestling. Obviously, wrestling can cause lots of pressure. What is your experience with putting pressure on yourself in wrestling, whether it's owning the company, booking it, being creative, or just performing?
I suppose I definitely found it kind of killed my passion for wrestling. I kind of found the pressure of especially in OTT was a lot, because you're as I said, like nobody wants to go out there and have a stinker of a match. So and you're 50% of the dance. So, you know, when you're walking out there and the other person's like, are you sure you have this? You're like, yeah, I think I have it. You know, it's just that I find that aspect stressful. And I think that's why I was very happy to kind of walk away from not doing wrestling matches anymore. Just the stress of having to remember matches, especially now, like the level of guys now are
Yeah.
it's not what it was back in the Tivoli days. The level of the guys now is just phenomenal. Um, but I think I've told this story before, but I just remember uh Tommy End. I think he wrestles Malachi Black now. Like his matches will be quite structured to, you know, duck a kick, take a kick, no sell this, then come back, give me one or whatever. Like, you know, very complicated calls. And I just remember, you know, coming back through it was in the Tivoli and trying to put a match together, intermission with him, you know, and he wanted to have the best match that we possibly could. But I think at that point it was like I can't do these shows and promote them and wrestle on them. And I'd speak the other thing as well I find stressful is that if a wrestling promoter is flown you from Ireland to say Germany, he's paid your flights, he's paying your accommodation, he's paying you a fee, and you just have a stinker, you know, that's a stress. You know what I mean? No one wants to, you know, be an import and you know, not have the match. You're an import because you have something that they don't really have in that country, or you have a talent, or you're over or whatever like that, and then you just don't come in with your end of the bargain. And again, sometimes it's just you just don't mix well with the opponent. It just happens sometimes. Like you talked about the Trent and Man Like Doris against the Social League. Like that match wasn't good. But all four guys are really, really great. You know, they're all really talented people. Just on that night, that match just didn't work. You know what I mean? And it just went on and on. And I'm standing at the sound desk going, why are these guys still going on and on and on? There's no saving this. So yeah, I suppose there's two examples of just stress from being a promoter and stress from being a wrestler. Like, yeah.
How stressful would it have been then putting together yourself and obviously Sam at the anniversary show?
Unbelievable. Like, so just a backstory on it, like myself and Sam, we made sure we had seats on the plane from Wolverhampton to Dublin the morning of that stadium show, and we started talking about what we could do. And then of course I get to the venues and I have to think about logistics, getting the ring put up, where's the merchandise going to be, how am I getting all the guys to the venue, how am I going to do the Matt Cardona meet and greet. So again, I had to walk off and deal with all that and come back, you know, maybe an hour before the show and, you know, try and put more stuff of it together. Like Sam is a professional. Sam was able to call a lot to me because he knew that I just had a lot of stress on that day. But yeah, like, I mean, it's just, as I said, like for me to come back to the ring, it would have to be a really good storyline. I thought me and Sam had a really good storyline, which is why I was willing to do it. But it would have to make sense. I don't have any kind of, I don't really want to just do matches to, you know, just to do them. I'm not interested at that point anymore. 40 now as well. So, yeah. But as I said, it's a testament to Sam. He was able to call a lot of it in there to me.
That's wow. And it's crazy how the wrestling life works, and it's just crazy how you can, like, how much stuff that people do not see behind the scenes beyond the pressure. It's just it's not only the wrestling day doesn't start with you coming out with the crowd. It starts with planning the match and putting the ring together, and more so if you're owning the company and thinking about all of that other stuff. That is crazy. Now, we talked about pressure. How many people in your career do you think left wrestling because of too much pressure? Do you have any of those cases, and why is that, in your opinion?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if it's not fun, you're not going to continue on doing it unless you're making a lot of money at it. But I mean, if you listen to Ric Flair on Joe Rogan there a while ago, he said he lost his confidence many times through his career. It can happen, you know. I've had people come, you know, before literally, you know, they're to go out there in match 3 or say for instance, and they come to you and they just say, I can't do this. I'm just mentally not there. I can't do it. And they're panicking. They're having a panic attack. So it's happened in the past, like where we've had to pull people, they're just backstage, and for whatever reason, they have a panic attack or whatever, and you kind of have to just work on the fly. So yeah,
How would you deal with something like that?
I mean, we got to save the match, so it's just whatever we can do backstage. I mean, it happened again recently with Sean Maxer and Matthew Smith.
Ricky.
Yeah. So we just kind of dealt
the
with
Ricky
it
Knight guy.
Yeah. But yeah, it actually has happened once or twice where it actually happened to me. Oh, it was years ago. I just found I'd done 2 shows in a row. I was very early on. This is probably maybe 2010 and maybe 2009. And we done 2 shows. We done 2 shows that weekend. And I was supposed to wrestle on the show as well. And I think Paddy Morrow could tell this story better because he was the one I was supposed to wrestle. And I just mentally broke down. I said to the guy, I can't do this. I said, I'm just going to lose everything. I can't do this. My mind is just the stress of running 2 shows that weekend. So yeah, basically what we did was I was supposed to be out with Paddy in the opener. So we put match 2 as the opener, and then we played Paddy's music when the 2 guys were in the ring, and Paddy came to the ring and said to the guys, this is now going to be a triple threat and I'm going over. And the guys thought that he was ribbing, or else Paddy wouldn't have had a match on the show that day. And Paddy's too good to be on the show. So yeah, we just dealt with him that way. Yeah.
How do you find dealing with those quick decisions then as well? For instance, like Sean Maxer Guinness, who got injured at the last show. How do you find dealing with those quick decisions?
There's such an occurrence in wrestling. Probably something like that would happen every show, and you just have to be on it, We have a great crew of people as well. So when anything like that happens, there's always 2 or 3 people that will come to you and say, look, we've these 2 or 3 options. We could do this, this, or this, So I'm surrounded by people that have a very good understanding of the wrestling business, For instance, like Ricky Knight Jr. had such a mind. Now his family, he comes from a wrestling family, so he's been ingrained in wrestling since a child. But he was able to put 2 and 2 together and say, well, Matthew is Sean's tag partner. Maybe we can do something, and they did it. They just kind of called it out there. And, but those, as I said, those occurrences happen so many times, it's just the way wrestling is.
Wow. That's again, every now and then I just stop on these things, and it's crazy that lots of people do not see this. Lots of people cannot understand how much pressure there actually is in the wrestling business, and these quick thinking, and if that quick thinking goes wrong, the amount of pressure that goes on to the people. Wow. I have another question that interests me in the stage. You said about traveling, you were talking about how stressful traveling is. How stressful is it to be away from home? And I'm speaking specifically your time in WWE, the time you were away from Ireland. Can you talk a bit about that experience and how you dealt with that?
Yeah, I've said it as well before. I was so kind of focused on getting to WWE as an overall performer. So I probably put too much focus into making sure my body was, right, and making sure my wrestling was on point, making sure my promos were on point. But I didn't probably take into account the mental aspect of basically combining your entire life into 2 suitcases. So I had to sell all the stuff that I'd had and collected and stuff. I had a dog that I loved at the time. That I was lucky to be able to rehome that dog, but broke up a relationship, said goodbye to my family. So it's just I suppose I didn't they say like starting a new job is one of the stressful things you can do, but then to take into account that you've left all your belongings behind, you've now got 2 suitcases, you're moving house, you're moving country, you're starting a new job. It was just like the ultimate paradigm shift. I don't know whether that kind of had an impact on it, because I definitely probably didn't prepare myself enough for that. And I think that's one of the when I left WWE, they were asking for feedback, and I said that to them. I was like, it's just gigantic, because they'd had a lot of they'd had a few issues with, you know, international talents just finding it mentally tough when they arrived. And when I told them all this, you know, they kind of made it easier to integrate into the system, you know. So for instance, I think I got there on the Thursday, and I was on the mats for Monday. You know, I had no place to live. I was still living out of a hotel at the time, because WWE didn't really kind of sort your accommodation. They just kind of gave you a list of apartments in the area that you could apply for. So yeah, and after that they made a lot of changes, you know, that you're integrated more slowly into the system. I think now it takes, you know, 10 days to 2 weeks before you start training. You kind of just come along and sit in, you start to meet people slowly, and, you know, integrate into the system, which is better now, you know. Plus I started in Tampa, and Tampa was kind of like it was the FCW grounds, you know, and it wasn't as nice a place. Tampa isn't as nice a place as Orlando, and you know, there was still some bits of bullshit as well, you know. Sometimes I've everyone I speak to now said it's just such a nice place to be, but back there was kind of, and sometimes as well, it wasn't nothing to do with WWE. It was just the boys in general, you know. It's competitive, you know. It's not like the indie scene. Like Sem will testify to this. When you're backstage at an OTT show, everyone is helping everyone. Everyone's just kind of having a laugh, and everyone's just kind of really nice to each other. But you have to realize in NXT, people are there essentially like in a competition to get out of NXT and make it onto the main stage, to make it onto TV. So it becomes more of a competitive environment, you know. And rightfully so, because there's only so many people are getting out of NXT onto the main roster, and the main roster is where you want to be. So, you know, that kind of side as well, that kind of element as well that goes along with it, you know, where you kind of realize that there's a lot of people that just, you know, they're going to do whatever it takes to get to the main roster, and fair play to them, you know. That wasn't my kind of game, you know. I kind of came from a Irish wrestling indie scene where everyone's really kind of looking out for each other and is kind of working to help each other, you know.
But
that's actually.
Oh, sorry. So just to say.
Go on.
But do you think that that's something that people really don't prepare themselves for? Is that kind of mental side of it, and like, especially if you're going from Ireland over to America, you know, I think it was season 1 of like Tough Enough years ago. Like Triple H was saying to the guys, you know, 365 if possible. You're on the road. You know, you're not at home. Your girlfriend, what's she doing? You don't know. Husband, what's he doing? You don't know. Nobody actually prepares for that mental aspect of getting to the big time and leaving everything behind you.
Yeah, I think in NXT they do kind of mentally prepare you for that, because they want you at the when I was there, they wanted us there at the Performance Center every day, you know, if they could. So you are kind of being tuned up to, you know, to expect. I mean, I remember talking to Sheamus, and he was telling me he was doing 5 days on, 2 days off. He literally only had, you know, a day and a half at home. I don't know if he's still on that kind of crazy schedule, but I remember him telling me that he was doing 5 and 5 off, 5 on and 2 off, you know. So it's quite grueling, you know. But yeah, you got to have an amazing passion for it. But as I said, at the time, I don't think they prepared you enough maybe for an international talent to leave everything behind, to be so far away from their friends. You know, when you're there in the Performance Center, you know, there would be times where they'd close for like 2 or 3 days, or, you know, you'd have the weekend off. And so many Americans, if they lived close to Florida, they could, you know, drive home for a while. But there was no chance of me getting back to Ireland for, you know, any amount of time.
By the time you land, you're getting back on the next plane.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did you have those thoughts as well, though, sorry, Sam. Did you have those thoughts when you went over, though, that you were kind of leaving everything behind? Or was it just that excitement of, okay, I'm getting a chance here?
It was the excitement of making sure that I can't fail. And as I said to you earlier, I made sure I was in the best shape. So I had, like, you know, had a personal trainer that had made me, I looked the part. Made sure my promos, that's where I developed Luther Ward. I made sure those promos were on point. You My wrestling, I thought at the time, I thought I was pretty solid in the ring. My footwork was good. But as I said, I didn't put into, it was really weird. It was like the week before I was going, I had to say goodbye to my dog. My relationship ended. I put all my stuff into 2 suitcases and kind of had to see what I had to leave behind. I rehomed the dog, as all this stuff, said goodbye to family. And then 24 hours later, you're in a hotel room in Florida with no friends, nobody around you, and 2 suitcases is all you have. That's the bit I probably I didn't put enough focus on, Yeah.
Wow. Now, attesting to what Joe said, the Irish scene is actually brilliant for that. Me personally, being a person that has always struggled with mental health, I think I've noticed it the first day I went into training, and I think I said it to the people. I was expecting going in, because in wrestling you always hear the stories of toxic competition and people sabotaging each other and all. And it's crazy how just at first, on the first day of training, the Irish scene just gave me that impression of, okay, wow, this is different. And it's great to know. It's great to know that there is something like that. Obviously the big leagues are the big leagues and there is lots of competition, but it's good to know that there is a scene where people genuinely help each other. There's obviously there will be competition everywhere, because at the end of the day, that's the card, that's the show, everyone wants to be there. But I feel like it's very cool to see that people actually do help each other, and we want to see each other succeed. You were talking about WWE being your goal at that stage and that time. After your experience in WWE, what is your advice to a wrestler listening to this podcast that has WWE as their ultimate goal? What is something that you would tell them before they make their whole life about getting to WWE and then probably collapsing under that pressure?
I always say have a backup. Always finish your education. I think that's really, really important to have a backup, because you could be the most wrestling's always based upon perception. I've said this as well. If you're, say McGregor, and you keep knocking people out, eventually, you're probably going to get a chance in UFC. You could be the greatest pro wrestler ever, but if there's no one thinking, if no one has the same perception as you, then you're not like. There's so many people in AEW or WWE where you turn around and you go, why isn't that person pushed? It's because the people at the top don't have the same perception as you. You know what I mean? So, you know, so basically have a backup plan, and be realistic with yourself. I mean, at the time, I was signed in 2012. At the time, I was quite realistic with myself. I gave myself, I think, 8 or 9 months to get there, and but I put everything into it. I didn't. I ate tuna and rice 4 or 5 times a day. That's all I ate. I was really strict on myself. I had this thing as well, as where I was like, I wasn't going to have any regrets. I wasn't going to turn around to myself, in my 40s or 50s and say, if I had to try a bit harder, I could have made it. I think that's the worst thing that could have happened. So I put everything into it. And yeah, I it was lucky that at the time my tryout I done well in the tryout, and it worked out. But I think today there's a lot more easier paths to WWE. I know they're talking about doing WWE Europe again. I don't know if it's gonna happen, but there's just so many more options to become and make money in pro wrestling these days. There wasn't back in when I was there in 2012. It was basically just WWE. There was no one. There was very few people making full-time money on the indies as well. Maybe Doug Williams and maybe a handful of other, top level UK guys. But nowadays, there's so many people making a full-time living, which is really great to see. But have small goals, chase the small goals. Once you complete those goals, make the next one bigger. That's how I did it, and I increased my confidence as well to say, maybe WWE isn't too far off the radar for me. Look at what I've accomplished. My first goal was like to get paid for a match. Then it was to kind of have a match outside Dublin. Then it was to have a match outside Europe. Then it was to have, and before you know it, you make a goal to wrestle in Japan. You wrestle in Japan. Then you start to think, well, maybe WWE isn't. It's not unattainable. I set all these goals, and I haven't failed at them yet. So if I keep going, what can I achieve? So, yeah, but be realistic with yourself as well. You know what I mean? There's so many people that say I want to. They're not doing a quarter of what I was doing. You know what I mean? So how badly do you want it? There's easy ways to say I want it, but are you putting the work in the gym? Are you putting the work in the promos? Are you putting your phone away for an hour a day and just thinking of ideas? As a lot of people probably say, that they're not shooting that to that level.
A lot of people listening going, yeah, he's right.
Yeah, yeah.
How is it then to look at the likes of Jordan Devlin, Aoife Valkyrie, and all the other people that have gone through the OTT over the years that are now in, I suppose, not only WWE but AEW?
It's amazing to see, and as I said, it's such a better industry for young pro wrestlers today, because there's so many more avenues. Like a while ago we said it was before COVID, but we were able to get guys try us for New Japan. So there's that aspect. If you want to go that route, if you want to go and try the WWE route, there's contacts there as well. But there's just so many. Like LJ Cleary is able to make it as a full-time wrestler. You wouldn't be able to do that, when I was breaking in. It just wasn't possible. It's great to see that today it is possible, and that guys can, kind of make somewhat of a living. And as well, the fans help, you know what I mean? The fans with the merchandise do, keep these pro wrestlers being able to do what they do and dedicate more time to being, developing their skills. But it's amazing to see Valkyrie and Jordan and even Walter. It's funny because Walter's been around forever. I mean, Walter was around when I was breaking in, and we used to see each other on the odd shows in Germany and stuff like that. But what an unbelievable mind for the business. Both him and Jordan, have unbelievable minds for the business. To be able to put matches together and tell stories like that is a talent in itself, I suppose.
Speaking of the difference between the yesterdays and today, throughout your experience, what is changed in wrestling in general in regards to mental health?
I think there's more awareness of it, wrestling back when I broke in. So I broke in a fair while ago, it was that tough man mentality. If you got a concussion, well, go out there and keep wrestling, it's only concussion, which was just, but at the same point, it was uneducated as well. The guys back then, they wouldn't have told you to go out there and wrestle on if you had a concussion, if they knew what we knew now, you know what I mean? It was just silliness. There was it was a big man game as well back in the day. It's not a big man game anymore. So you kind of had that, masculinity walking around the dressing room. It doesn't exist anymore. The industry is a much better place now because it doesn't draw on the muscle bound guys, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I suppose with that muscle boundness, there does become a kind of a slight intimidation with these guys, I mean, I remember when I was at my biggest, people would say to me they said, Joe, you don't understand, it can be quite intimidating to talk to you, because of your size, so it's just a much better industry now, I think, all around. It's a healthier industry as well. There was a lot when I was breaking in, there was a lot of wrestlers masking pain with painkillers and medication. I remember the very first AEW War tour that we went on, and there was just such an amount of drugs. I can honestly say, you know what I mean, I've never seen drugs at an OTT show, you know what I mean. It just doesn't. Whereas the AEW War days, it was just painkillers and Xanax, and you know what I mean, it was constant. So it's much better business now, and it's nice to see that. And it's nice to see that there's not that there's already enough pressures in being a pro wrestler than to not have that pressure to try and pack on as much muscle as you possibly can. That's something as well that I found a stressor as well. Stressor mentally and a stressor physically, because I went to the doctor at one point. I think I was 70.5 stone. And I said to the doctor, I said, my back is just wrecked. And he's like, you're just way, 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 way too heavy. He said, you have a 15 stone frame and you have 17 and a half on it, like, you know, so there's not that stress to go out there and, you know, stuff your face constantly eating food. I mean, I used to have to carry around lunch boxes of food every day to maintain weight and stuff. So it's good to see that there's not those stresses anymore.
We had Damo on there a few months ago as well, and he was saying the same thing, you know, mental health wise, everything. He was saying, you know, back in the old days, like, it was terrible. He says, like, between everybody, like, everyone was just as bad as each other. He said he's happy that now everyone's educated, everyone's working together, there's nobody out to get anybody, you know. He was really praising as well the lads backstage currently in OTT with how much more respect they have for each other than what it was, we'll say, 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's just it's a much nicer atmosphere. Yeah, I do remember those times of just that kind of, you know, kind of bully boy kind of mentality of, you know, oh, this guy did wrong, so let's teach him a lesson tonight. You know, I think that's probably you know, you never see that anymore in wrestling. But that was when I was breaking in, that would have been, this guy has no respect for the business, so let's teach him a lesson out there. It's like, this guy is giving you his body and he does no idea that you're going to stiff him, and then you're going to stiff him. Like, I'd have more respect for you if you said, look, let's go outside and sort something. But to do it when someone's giving your body is probably the ultimate act of cowardness, you know. But I can't even recall the last time I've even heard or seen of that happening, you know. It's you know, it wouldn't be tolerated either. It would not be tolerated, you know. The boys in the locker room, if someone turned around and said, oh, so and so did me wrong, watch what I do out here tonight, people would say, are you for real? Like, you know.
Yeah.
That's good to know, being like a wrestler breaking in now. It's reassuring. It's good to know that the scene is different, because personally myself, I don't think I could have survived in that conditions, if that makes sense. Do you think personally that impacted the way your career went, that type of that toxicity that there was around ultimately impacted your career somehow, or do you think things would have gone just the same?
It made me stronger, you know. It was back then, it was either a sink or swim, you know, and I was able to swim at the same point. Like I wouldn't let anyone walk over me at the same point. But I understand some people are not very confrontational. It didn't bother me to be confrontational, you know. You know, if someone was going to say and whatever, I didn't have that issue, you know what I mean? So I was able to be fine. Not that people didn't try and mess with me from time to time, but it never became that issue with me, you know? So, but yeah, there's probably a lot of talents that were lost because they couldn't stick that environment. But that was just the environment. That was the environment in WWE. That was the environment in WCW. That was the environment in, you know, because it was, the entire industry was made of shooters and bodybuilders, you know? So it was just masculine testosterone around in the locker rooms. Women weren't backstage, you know, very seldom. Back in the day, you would have, you know, a show with women wrestlers on it as well. So yeah, it definitely did shape me. It made me tough as well. Yeah, it made me mentally tough to, you know. There was times where I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this, but you know, I'm happy I was able to stick it out, you know, because if I didn't, I suppose it'd be a different scene.
Can I ask you, just because obviously wrestling in Ireland, I was listening to Chris Van Vliet, the podcaster, and he had Chris Masters on, and you know, he talks about his debut and he accidentally stiffed Stevie Richards, and he was like, oh god, I don't want to be known as the big guy who's dangerous to work with, because nobody wants to work with them. Was there ever anyone like that who was the big guy and was just stiff as hell? He didn't care who you were, he was just, you know, he'll go out of his way to hurt you to make himself better?
I don't think there was anyone that would go out there and intentionally try and hurt you, because they wouldn't be around. There's some guys that were just heavy-handed. Like I think Sheamus would admit this. Sheamus is heavy, you know what I mean? But that's just the way he works. Doesn't mean anything about it. Doesn't mean anything by it. You know, I think even, you know, Kevin Nash did a podcast there a while ago talking about just Sheamus just being stiff. That's just the way he is. He's safe, you know, but I think like maybe even before my time, some of the promoters would have bruisers, you know, someone that they had issues with, and they would put this, you know, wrestler in with them. But yeah, you know, there's, you know, sometimes in wrestling back in my day, what would happen is they would find massive bodybuilders, and they looked really good on the poster. So they would be on the shows, but they were dangerous. You know, they were, you know, so many steroids in them. They didn't even know how strong they were, but they would just launch it, you know. But when talking to them, there was no badness in them, like, you know what I mean? They just didn't know what they were doing. They were on shows, and it happens today even with women's wrestling. You know, just sometimes promoters want women on the show, so, you know, women, you know, sometimes make it onto shows before they're ready. You know, they probably shouldn't be in the ring at this point, but because there's such a, you know, such a male dominated industry, that you know, sometimes women, or sometimes the girls who aren't fully trained in shows. But that was the same thing that you would have back in, like, you know, the early, like late 90s, early 2000s, where you would just have bodybuilders who would be killing people, you know. But never to my as I said, never to my, I never thought it was intentional, you know. Like sometimes you go backstage and be like, was everything okay? It was like, you need to work on that body slam, or you need to work on that clothesline. Like, there's a really nice guy, I won't name him, he's a super nice guy, but you just got to be really careful when you're wrestling. And it's not his fault. He loves wrestling. He's a super nice guy, but he just kills you with the clotheslines, body slams, wherever he's gonna hit you with. It's just reckless, but he doesn't know any better, you know.
So Sam, you've got to work on your clotheslines.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know any better. Now to change topic a bit, I'll throw a stone at you, and it's up to you if you want to talk about it or not. What are some of the worst times in your wrestling memory, and some of the best times in your wrestling memory?
Some of the, I'll start with the, I suppose I should start with the worst and then kind of lighten it up with the best. The worst, I would say the whole Moxley fiasco, and the Eddie Kingston fiasco. You know, literally less than 24 hours before he's begun the flight, he gets COVID. You know, so that week was probably, that whole 2-3 weeks was probably the most stressful period of my life. It was hard, and we'd had a death in the family as well. It was just a colossal amount of just stress. But at the same point, like, I kind of was able to kind of realize to myself, it's like, right, focus on how shit this situation is not going to fix it. Let's start focusing the energy on the, you know, the brain power on how we can fix it. Try and think. Another really hard time was we did if anyone remembers Test from WWE, we were doing a tour with Test, and Test had some issues with drugs, with painkillers, and we'd done a couple of tours with him, and he was in a bad way, and yeah, like in a bad way, to where we thought, like, this guy could probably die in this tour. Like, he was really bad. And I'd heard that when he went back after the tour, some people had heard, like, you know, Tess was really messed up on this tour, and they had like a little intervention for him, and he kind of got clean. And then on the next tour he was on with us, he was fine, he was coherent, he was coming out with us to, you know, because sometimes he'd just go back to his room and get absolutely fucked up and stuff. And everything was great, and he'd come out, and, you know, we'd go drinking around little, we did a couple of days, I think this was France, but he was like, it was so nice to have him, you know, just coherent and like with it and happy. He seemed like he had a real buzz for life. And we all said, right, end of the tour, we said, right, we'll see you on the next one. I think the next one was like another 6 months down the road. And I think maybe 2 days before the tour, he passed away. And every time we went to the hotel to check in, his name would always be checked in for the room. So the hotel staff would always call our names and they call test, and everyone would just go like that, because you'd always just remember it. Like,
yeah.
And there was little things as well. Like it was supposed to be, I think his birthday was also supposed to be on the tour. So, our tour manager had bought him this like triple XL tour jacket, and it was really, really kind of a tough tour to get through. He was such a funny guy as well. Like, that was a tough tour, to kind of realize that this guy should be with us right now, kind of having the fun, and we should be all sitting at dinner here, and he's unfortunately passed away. Yeah, they were the tough times. So let's lighten it up with some good times. My best times, I suppose, was like the Walter Devlin run.
Yes.
I remember going to Jordan and saying, like, look, I said, we're going to do a title switch. And he was really apprehensive about it. I was like, Jordan, he takes the belt off you. I said, and then we build back you winning it again. And he's like, I really don't know about this, Joe. Because I don't think he'd had the belt that long before we had made the idea of dropping it to Walter. And I remember saying to Walter, like, if we gave you the strap, could you commit to these dates? And he was like, I will try my absolute best. And he'd always said at the time he wasn't going to WWE. He said that his focus was more for Japan. He said he would like a run in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So we were kind of like, okay, let's do this. And I still watch it back to this day. The time when Walter, which is fair enough, like we created this really good story, but the two guys made such a dramatic match that when Walter finally pinned Devlin, the whole place just went, to see that, and kind of being able to pull that off was magic, and yeah, that was some really, really good times. And as well, I suppose the just kind of seeing the young guys, that's what I love, seeing young guys coming through and making some memories for themselves. Was really fortunate to do some really great stuff in wrestling. I got to WWE, and I've been on tour buses with some of the top wrestlers. I've got to wrestle some of the best wrestlers. It's people that I idolized as kids. I was in the ring with, so being able to pass something on to where one day they might, like it's funny, like they were saying that what's his name? Matt Cardona. They were like saying to me, is like, you don't understand, like Matt Cardona to us is the equivalent of like, say a Kerry Von Erich to me, like, you know what I mean? Back in the day, or a Big Boss Man, so yeah, I suppose just being able to see the younger guys come through has been really nice.
Can I just ask you as well with the bringing up of Matt Cardona, because we've spoken about it with LJ, I think we spoke about it with I can't remember who brought it up just the first time, but the rib of Cardona and not telling LJ, yeah, you're going over. Were you sitting back there just going, oh, just wait for him to just wait for him to be just like, what's going on?
Cardona had actually said it to us. I think it was in Dublin Airport. So we'd done Wolverhampton the night before, and he said to us, he goes, wouldn't it be really cool, he said, or if I put LJ over? I said it'd be magic, because some guys are a little bit reluctant to put indie talent over. Cardona was an absolute, he was an absolute gift to deal with that weekend. He was so easy. But there was another part of that match was that we'd clued Foxy in because he was the referee. So the referee is always told, the finish beforehand. But Foxy had gotten injured in the show. I think he'd had some something with his rib maybe. So it only dawned on me that we were going to use the second referee. And I was like, he doesn't know the finish. He doesn't know. It's because up on the backstage screen, it would have said that Cardona was going over. And I was like, so this referee, the second referee, actually thinks that Cardona is going over. So he may not do the finish, So that was another thing where we had to get a runner and clue in the second referee and say, look, LJ doesn't know, but you have to know that in the ring, he's going to allow LJ to go over. So lucky we clued him in, or the whole thing could have been a complete fucking mess.
I love seeing his face afterwards when he goes over. And even the ref at the time is there going, yeah, we gotcha.
Yeah.
Just when he touches that top rope and he's like, oh, this is real.
Yeah.
I think that's the magic of wrestling, though. I remember I was watching the match from upstairs there and at the National Stadium. You can just clearly see Lee being confused, and then he turns around, and then there's the release that, oh my God, it happened. That's the beauty of wrestling, and some of this pressure and these sacrifices at the end of the day are worth it just for those moments. That's very wow. Is there anything you learned from those bad moments you mentioned? Is that something that changed you over time after you faced those moments you were talking about?
Yeah, I remember years ago. So before OTT, I used to promote American Wrestling Rampage, and they were much bigger shows. I mean, we were on the road for like 2 to 3 weeks. Majority of the roster was former WWE guys, so like Sky Too Hottie, Rob Van Dam, Janetti, Tatanka, I think Sid Vicious was on the tour, Steiner, Booker T, all these former WWE guys. So Bret Hart. But I remember something went wrong one night, really bad with the show, and I was just livid. And another promoter turned around to me and says, Joe, if you keep on reacting the way you are, you're not going to last very long in entertainment. The biggest thing you can remember is that it's just entertainment. We're not trying to save lives here. We're just trying to entertain the people. And yeah, it didn't go right today, but if you continue to deal with the stress the way you're dealing with it, you're not going to last here. So that was a big thing, it went wrong, but what can we do? It went wrong. There's nothing we can do. We can learn from it, So just to kind of learn from those issues and not take it personally, As I said, the one thing that's helped me is that nobody's intentionally going out there to fuck up the show. It just sometimes happens that they fucked up and it's really impacted the show. Okay, so what can we do to fix it? Another thing as well is like instead of mentally focusing on, I can't believe this happened and what was he thinking and why did this, switch the focus to, it's happened. What are we going to do now to fix it? Because you can sit there in your own, pool of piss for 20 minutes being, angry and pissed off. And you could have used those 20 minutes to go, right, let's have this here. Let's park it over here. What are we going to do to fix this? That's where the energy and the focus needs to be. So those kind of, those issues. I mean, Eddie Kingston, sending an email literally 2 hours before he was supposed to get on the flight and saying he has COVID. It's like, I've probably got really upset for like maybe 25 minutes. And then I was like, right, I need to seriously sit down now and rejig these entire cards. And I need to know what I'm going to do with the public announcements and stuff like that. I could have wasted another 2-3 hours being angry, but it's just not going to get me anywhere. At that point as well, those decisions that you're making need to be made so fast. You need to really be on them, because people want answers,
And just even like for that weekend. Sorry, Carmo, I'll let you go.
I was just going to say, speaking of that weekend, obviously with a lot of things not going the right way of Scarpamania, social media I find is something that plays a lot into wrestling these days. Is that something that you try to stay away from, or do you go and kind of read stuff?
For my own mental health, I don't really look at social media. I don't owe anyone that, I find as well, and I'll say this, I find people are more angry on Twitter than they are Instagram and Facebook, because your family and friends are on your Instagram and your Facebook, and Twitter is just this big shout box where people think it's a free-for-all to abuse people because you don't agree with somebody. I mean, I'll say this, I don't think many people know, especially during COVID. I know everyone was having a tough time. I don't think many people know how badly some of the roster was affected mental health wise from people on Twitter. And they've a lot of people to, those people have a lot to answer for, behaving like that. And they're not kids, they're adults, They're grown men, you know, putting out. One guy phoned me one night, bawling, crying because he'd been accused of being behind some Twitter handle, and honestly, this kid had absolutely zero idea what this was about. You know what I mean? Madness. Being accused by an adult, a grown man. So for me personally, I don't check social media all that much personally. I will for business, for business, I have to stay on top of for business. But for me personally, I only got an Instagram account there, I think the last 2-3 months. I've never had Instagram. I don't update my Facebook. I use it just for Messenger to kind of, speak to talents. Twitter is just, a toxic shithole. And as I said, people will use Twitter because their family and friends aren't saying to them, what was that person there that you were having a pop at? Or what's that about? Oh, it's basically someone I don't really agree with. So I decided to, come after them really, really in a heavy-handed, abusive way. You know what I mean? It is what it is.
Twitter is absolutely ridiculous because obviously we all know what happened for Scrapper Weekend, all the people dropping and stuff like that. But even I remember Kenny McIntosh had put up a post about OTT and he's like, I feel so bad for yourself and the promotion and stuff. And I remember reading this person said something absolutely stupid. Who he clearly didn't have the full story of what happened in past things, and being like, don't promote them, this happened, blah blah blah. And I'm just like, they sorted that issue like that as quick as possible, and now you've got Kenny McIntosh going, oh yeah, no, I won't promote them no more. And as soon as I was like, yeah, no, they sorted this, he's like, oh, that's perfect still. So they sorted, yeah, no, they sorted it. Like, it's just absolute, like, Twitter is very, like, a lot of just brain dead people who will take one part of the story, hold that story, and not care about the actual finish of it.
Yeah, it is what it is. And as I said, Twitter is just like kind of a shout box for people to, offload their whatever is going on with them. But, you kind of have to look at who it is. I mean, for instance, I'll tell you this one. We were working with a mental health group to spread more mental health messages. And it went onto Twitter, and of course, this got attacked. Not on Instagram, not on Facebook, on Twitter. Got attacked. It's like, oh, isn't it rich that OTT are talking about mental health, blah blah blah, and they decided to pull the campaign. So the whole message to our fans of mental health gets lost because of these people on Twitter. It's just, I don't know, man. It's a cesspool. I don't look at it.
You are much better off. Off.
I'm very happy about my choice. I was debating whether leaving Twitter is good or bad, and this just gave me I'm very happy I left Twitter. I didn't have Twitter for much, but it's just very easy to share stuff that you're not accountable for. And speaking of the mental health thing, I'm personally pushing mental health a lot. It has its own risks. It has its own things of people, telling you're doing that for attention and all. But if you're in mental health, you have to push your idea no matter what, no matter how many people are coming at you and telling you that, you're wrong and all that stuff. That's what, that's the only way you can change something. Joe, you spoke very briefly. You said COVID. That must have been a tough period. It was a tough period for a lot of people outside of wrestling. What is your personal recollection of COVID in wrestling?
I suppose we had the double whammy because, Scrapper Mania was pulled with John Moxley just about to, we were supposed to do that massive show. And so that was a kind of a hurtful one, to kind of lose all that. But I suppose everyone will remember their period of COVID. And I suppose as well, I reflect upon it as well with some good memories. I know a lot of people it was a bad, dark time for people, but, people were making an effort to stay in contact more, Zoom meetings was going on and, get together, watch parties was going on. And, you kind of checked in more on each other and your family. And I think that's already become a little bit lost. So I do have some I reflect upon COVID a bit more fondly, I suppose, than other people. I just liked the downtime. Me and my brother like I don't see my brother as much anymore, but you know, during COVID, at the time you were allowed to see one other member or two other members, or whatever the ridiculous rules were going on at the time. But like we started working out together again, and you know, so it was really good, you know, and we'd have the chats in between, you know, working out. And yeah, so my COVID time was kind of nice. I wouldn't mind
it's
a
kind
week
of
back.
it's kind of funny. I have some stories about that myself. I talked about, you know, COVID with a good few people, and obviously it was a tough moment because lots of people suffered from it, and you know, there's a lot of sadness around it. But even me personally, I thought I was stupid because I enjoyed that time. It was almost an excuse to have some time for yourself. And I think during COVID, I was in my peak shape, physically, mentally. It gave you time. It made you reflect about the people that you're close with, and it was good. And it's crazy that I was expecting COVID to be the worst period ever. I was expecting it to be amongst your worst periods in wrestling, and I'm kind of surprised that it's not. And it was actually a good moment, which is good. Um, Joe, I'm about to throw another stone at you. And again, it's something you can feel free not to reply to. But we're talking about mental health. We're talking about Twitter. We're talking about how Twitter can impact someone's life. There's one name that is synonymous with all of this, and that's Ryan Smile. Um, how did all that situation impact you and impact OTT, if you want to talk about that?
Ryan was the first. Him and Pete were the first two guys that we ever brought in. I'd actually known Ryan. I met Ryan first. I was doing shows in Poland, and he was on the shows. I don't know, man. It was just, I don't know. Ryan even designed the OTT logo. So Ryan was doing all our graphics beforehand. And that's how I actually met Ryan. I'd known he was a talent because, as I said, I had met him in Poland doing shows. And I knew he was also doing graphics. And I'd reached out to him and I was like, look, we need some graphics for this. I heard you're the guy. It's like, yeah. So, you know, we started bopping ideas. And then I said to him, I said, would you be available to do the show? And he's like, yeah, I'd love to do the show. Because I think he was doing, for some people that may have remember, there was a company here called DCW. And I think he was doing some of those shows. So some of the real old hardcore fans would have remembered him at that time. He's like, yeah, I'd love to come back to Dublin. You know, Ryan, obviously, and it was, you know, very well known in the locker room that Ryan had bouts of mental health. I think he'd had some kind of health issues as well that were kind of lingering as well. But everyone was kind of very much aware of his mental health issues. And there had been times where he'd no-showed events. But, you know, upon reflection, I think it was just completely down that he just wasn't mentally able. You asked the question, like, you know, has it ever happened where someone has had to pull out because they just couldn't, you know? And I think that was Ryan sometimes, you know? Mm-hmm. But still at the same point, like, just devastated, shocked, you know? You kind of meet these people, but you don't think it's ever going to happen, you know? Yeah, it was devastating. But it's kind of hard because, like, it's sad talking about it, but like when you think of Ryan, you kind of smile because he was just, anyone who knows him, he was just a prima donna, but everyone loved him for being a prima donna. Just really loud, really passionate about wrestling. He loved wrestling. He was so good. He was so talented.
Loved the wrestling.
He loved it. But yeah, I mean, my memories of Ryan, I suppose, will just always be there. What a talent, you know. He understood wrestling as well. You look at that stuff he did with Osprey, you know, the Uptown Funkers in the very first stadium show. He was just, you know, he was on. You know, he knew that this is the first stadium show, and that's what I mean. It's such a help to be around such talented people like that. he knew this was the first stadium show and there had to be a spectacle, you know, and you know, I think 2 weeks beforehand, him and Ryan Osprey and Ryan mailed me and said, is there any way we could get some dancers? We want to do a big entrance at the stadium. And I hadn't even thought about that, you know. That's what I mean about dealing with people that are just really mega talented. They're thinking as well about how to make the show amazing. And we wouldn't have had that, you know. They came out and did that amazing dance. I think their intro, I think it's free on YouTube, but I think the intro to that match alone, all the entrance, I think the entrances are probably 12 minutes, but magic. You know? But I have so
Is it
many.
the one with Lee Rush?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so many fond memories of Ryan. You know, people found him a little bit hard because he's such a prima donna and so loud, but at the same point, everyone kind of loved him. You know what I mean? He could be a bit annoying backstage because he'd be so, oh my God, we need this. Oh, wow, you know what I mean? And people just were, fuck Ryan again, you know? But everyone loved him, you know, and he was such a good energy to have in the locker room. He was so funny as well. You know someone who's unintentionally funny. Ryan was sometimes unintentionally funny. I miss Ryan. What a talent.
There's a funny story about this because I've never personally met Ryan, but I feel connected to him mainly for one reason, and that reason is that OTT is the first show I've ever saw live ever. First wrestling show was All Day Star. After COVID, when OTT came back to Dublin after the COVID bit, I started training in September, and the show was in early October, I think. And it was just that day I was going, like, in that period I was going through so much myself as well. I changed job, I changed house, I was betting into this whole wrestling thing that could have not worked. I didn't have faith that it could actually become real and all of that stuff. And I was just enjoying the show. So it's kind of like, the way I explain it to people now, it's kind of like I was going through black and white, a period of black and white emotion wise. Everything was just gray. And that day it was just so colorful. And the show ends and Will Ospreay is talking about Ryan Smile. And I think I cried for a good 20 minutes after that. I just cried so much. It was like kind of like a little key that opened. And I was like, wow, I needed this. I needed that moment. I needed someone that was talking about mental health. And, you know, it somehow, I don't think I would be in the same position I am today without that moment. And it's crazy how some things create this chain effect. So rants apart, speaking about Ryan again, we obviously remembered some of his moments and, you know, some of good memories that are good to keep. Do you think, Joe, personally, that the scene has changed, something has changed before and after that whole situation, mental health wise, or do you think it's pretty much the same still?
I think Irish wrestling's, I think if you haven't been in an English locker room or a German locker room, you know, I think Irish wrestling, not that there's anything wrong with those locker rooms, but I think Irish wrestling is we're such a small country that we all completely know each other, where there's wrestlers from the top end of the UK to the, you know what I mean, to the bottom that have probably only seen each other a few times. Essentially, like if you're wrestling for Fight Factory, it's the same crew of guys all the time looking out for each other. If you're wrestling for OTT, it's more or less the same locker room, kind of looking out.
Pretty much.
Yeah, you know, like you even speak like to like man like DeReese and all, like he feels like he's one of the Irish locker room lads, like, you know, because he's there so much. Same with Trent. But no, I think the Irish locker room, and I think a lot of people will agree with this. I think that there's so many people that love being in the Irish locker room because it is like that. You know, it's a group of people looking out for each other. And there's no bitchiness. So no, I think Irish wrestling, I think, has always been a good bunch of people. You know what I mean? And it continues to be, despite it continues to be a bunch of people kind of looking out for each other, which is really nice and refreshing.
Just to add to the praise there, just as like a fan, on the outside kind of watching. I know I've said this to Sam, I've said this to Boots and stuff like that.
Hello.
But it's crazy to see the support and everything that everyone gives. Not just like the guys for each other, but especially the fans. The time they have for the fans in between the show, after the show, is just second to none. Like, the lads are absolutely brilliant. Like, I think Scrappermania, the last one, is a massive example. Like, the amount of time that everyone gave to the fans afterwards. We were talking to Danny Cross for ages. Trent being an absolutely brilliant salesman with Carmo. He was just walking. He was just walking past, and Trent pulled him in. And just goes, pick a scarf. Okay, pick a scarf. He picks one up. 20. What? 20. The lads there's just the fun that everyone brings to the show, and the time they have for the fans in the Irish wrestling scene is absolutely second to none, and you've built something absolutely amazing between all of you.
Yeah, I think they have a passion for it as well. Like the wrestlers like Trent and everyone just be buzzing after a show, especially if it's been a really kick-ass show. Everyone's just buzzing. They're like, how can we build upon this? That's why I love Irish wrestling. I think that's why everyone loves being in the Irish wrestling locker rooms as well. It's because it's a good vibe. It's not. I've been in locker rooms before. I won't say where it's clicky. You'll have like 5 guys over there, kind of saying, "Did you see the state of that match?" And then you'll have 5 people over here, you know what I mean, and they're bickering about that. It's not nice, you know what I mean. It's very seldom you're in those locker rooms, but sometimes it does happen. But it's OTT has always just been this real welcoming kind of let's try and make this show as great as we possibly can.
And it's funny because plastered on all banners in the School of Irish Wrestling, there's the word respect. And I think that is one of the first things I noticed, and it was so pushed on in the open day I attended when I started. And it's very cool. So that is honestly a testament on, how these things then go impact the scene. That is it's a great thing to have. And I love that respect bit. So on this, fair play to you, Joe, for that. So we spoke about a lot of things during this episode, but now we're at a stage which our fans can appreciate a little more. This is the let's read the fans question moments. So Joe, are you ready to reply to answer some of the fans questions?
Yeah, I'll try and get through them as quick as we can because I don't want to bore people to death. But
Joe is clearly afraid of those questions. He's making up excuses. So, ladies and gentlemen, we start with some questions. Carmo, do you want to introduce us with the questions, please? Thank you.
Let's do it, 100%. This one comes from Linda. This one comes from Linda Cunningham, and she says that she's thinking of adopting her first dog ever this summer. How does Joe find being a dog owner contributes to positive mental health?
You can have my dog and see if it like I'd always had dogs. I grew up in a house with dogs. The problem is that you kind of forget as to how much of a handful I had in my dog since it was a pup, but it ate my house to bits. It ate a coffee table, it ate a can of Coke, it ate a tray of eggs. It ate my 2 TV remote controls, like headphones. So there's a lot, like, your mental health will be definitely challenged. But at the same point, like, it's just amazing to have, a dog in the house. You know what I mean? And my dog is extra special. Like, he's really good natured. Like, I love him to bits. Yeah. But so it's been massive. Yeah.
A big sausage. Shout out to the big sausage. dog.
I could just
So
But just to recap,
Go-
like just know how much, time consuming it is to train them as well. And the other thing as well, it does change your kind of life, because there would be times where I would like to leave my house at 2 and I'll come back to like 8. But I can't leave my dog there that long. So it kind of alters your plans a lot. If you're going for weekends away, so like for instance, like Wolverhampton weekends, I have to bring my mom to my place to stay here to mind my dog. So those things. But at the same point, I wouldn't change it. Like, he's a great dog.
once when we posted the post for to ask people about the questions, we asked them a mental health question and a wrestling question.
Yeah.
So in this case, Linda asked about the dog, and her wrestling question was, I love hearing someone's road stories from traveling to and from show. Would you share one of yours? Just like, did anyone ever eat a sandwich when they weren't allowed? That's the question. Would you, do you have any funny stories that you want to share with us?
I'll come
I
back
like
to
sandwiches.
it. Yeah, I'll come back.
He'll come back to it.
Yeah, I'll come back to that one.
We go on to the next question. Sean O'Kelly. We answered to his mental health question, which is, have you ever had to pull a wrestler from a show due to bad mental health? Which we answered pretty much already. But his non-wrestling related question is very interesting, and I want to read it just because I like it. Not really a question. Just thanks for everything you do for us, Joe, on a monthly basis. You're killing it. That's the positive energy we want to share. Now, Carmo has asked questions. Mr. 115, it's your turn.
So this one comes from Claire, and Claire, this is her mental health question. She says, ask Joe if he feels he fosters an environment where wrestlers and trainees feel they can discuss issues, be they be physical or mental.
Yeah, so like back in the old school where we had Robin Hood, and it continues on to this day, I always try and get to the school either 15 to 20 minutes beforehand, but I'll always stay behind. So as soon as the class ends, I go into my office and people can, knock in and talk about whatever. Now, most of the time they're knocking about pitching ideas for shows, but there has been a few times where people have come and said like they're struggling, and I don't give any advice because I'm not trained, but I will point them in the right ways to get them help. And it happened a lot, going into COVID. And now we have Anne from OTT, so her talent relations. So if anything kind of gets beyond my scope, I kind of relay them to Anne, and Anne is able to set them up with, anything that they may need. If they need counseling, if they need, any form of like, if there's, helpline numbers or something like that they can help them. But yeah, 100%, there's an open door policy there for anyone who needs to talk to me in any way, shape or form. Yeah, I think it's really important as well.
And to attest to this and to answer, to fully answer the question that Claire asked, I'll share a story. I've been struggling with my own mental health, and sometimes I struggle with motivation, with just going through the day. And in the last few episodes, we were talking about the spoon theory, the fact that some days, normal people wake up with 20 spoons, wake up with lots of energy and whatever. And me being neurodivergent, I kind of have to make my energy. I still remember a specific day in which I was struggling just with life in general. And I texted Joe being like, hey, that's the situation. And you've been very good to me. And I appreciated that day. And it was just something, it's a little thing, but Joe answered me with, if you ever need a coffee or anything, I'm here. That is a little testament, he wasn't supposed to do that, but he did it. Right now, I'm not talking to the fans. I'm more talking to the performers. Hearing this, I think everyone struggles with mental health. Everyone has their own, ups and downs, and wrestling is very competitive, and we put lots of pressures on ourselves. I'm the first one that puts an incredible amount of pressure, and to this day, I think without that pressure, I wouldn't be where I am. So pressure is good up till a certain point, but make sure you don't collapse under that pressure. Make sure you're always able to give those small things. In that case, that day, hey pal, if you need anything, we go get a coffee together, brighten my day. So if anyone listening can get that and, share it in their own way, words can help a lot. So it's very important. I personally think that these small things really help, and just always be careful with what you say to people, more so if you know that people are in need. Words can have can be very heavy, but also they can be very beneficial. So, I just wanted to share this little story to close this little to close the answer properly, and about just in general mental health in OTT. And I spoke with a good few of the performers, and it's cool that we're creating this environment of more openness. And it's cool that we have, Joe, that's the head of OTT, talking openly about mental health. Personally, it's a win. Personally,
Yeah, and as I
this is
said
a
as
win,
well,
and this is.
and I say to my talents as well, like, if there's ever anything that kind of gets too heavy for you, you're always, you can always reach out to Anne. Her email is kind of readily available to the OTT roster, but you can always reach out to Anne, and Anne will get you we've done it several times, from people who've been struggling. But Anne will put you in touch with the people and help you in whatever way we can, so it's important.
So it's very important, mental health. So this is literally me, the Sam, talking to my fellow colleagues. If anyone is struggling, you have the resources, and Joe is telling you that. So, we help each other. Let's help each other, and let's not, I've got, before we keep going with the questions now, I've got a question for you, Joe, and this is me as a fan typing up and asking a question. And this is my Andrea is asking us this question on Facebook. Joe Cabray, you cry?
I haven't cried since I was in the States. My mom, not a funny story, but my mom knew I was feeling homesick, and she sent me a big box of goodies. So like Cadbury's chocolate, like all the Cadbury's chocolate in America is like made with corn syrup or some shit. It tastes.
Joe loves his chocolate.
Huh?
I said Joe loves his chocolate.
I love my chocolate. But anyway, she sent me over a big box of like all Irish stuff, and she'd got a fucking mug. This is mum's for you. She got a mug printed with my old dog on it that I'd had to rehome. That was it. But not since then. 2014. That's kind of fucked up, though, I suppose, isn't it? 2014. I don't know what it is.
That is heartbreaking.
Maybe
the story.
Maybe Sam, you'll make me cry after this tournament.
Yes, sir. Renzo is complaining about stuff, but please do not listen to Renzo. I'm a good person. I will convince him.
I think he's going to bring this issue further, I think.
Sorry.
There's always no, Martin. No, I talk now.
No. I interrupted you. That's what I said. Sorry.
This is really, really important, Martin, and I think you will agree with me. There's always good in people. It's very easy to judge the cover. There is some good in that Renzo person. I will bring the good.
You'll find it.
I will bring the good. Now. And I opened the topic of crying because after my first match in OTT, I cried so much, and I came back to Joe, and Joe was like, "You're crying now. I know you're crying too, Joe. What's up with that?" Sorry.
2014.
But still, that was a personal, a little personal inconvenience. Let's keep going with the fans' questions. Emmett Allen, one of the 5 Marks, if I'm not wrong,
Yep.
asks,
100%.
how does Joe manage the work-life balance? I'd imagine his workload is next level. What does he do to level out?
Yeah, we kind of touched on it. I eat a lot of chocolate and I go a lot of dog walks. No, I kind of I just kind of have to have an escape in the evening. So yeah, I have a work time. I kind of clock in from 9 till maybe 4:30. And then after that, I try not to, sometimes it doesn't always work, but I try and park it there. But I'm behind at the moment, so I will be working this evening, but just kind of bopping ideas. But yeah, you kind of have to. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I've been doing it forever. I've been promoting shows since I broke in, so I kind of have it down to a fine art at this point. Yeah.
I guarantee there's some person now with a notebook going, how to start Irish wrestling promotion. Get a dog, eat chocolate, repeat.
How much Candy Crush helped that?
Yeah, if I'm on Candy Crush, stuff is that's another thing as well. I kind of just, it stops me thinking because I'm kind of concentrated on my phone. So I do play Candy Crush a lot.
I opened this topic because it's very funny. I play a game called 1010, in which it's kind of similar to Tetris, but it helps me. I have pretty severe ADHD, so in order to focus, I need to do 11 tasks at once, because otherwise my brain just goes elsewhere. So it helps me. It's my coping mechanism. So can we say that Candy Crush is another coping mechanism for Cabray?
Yeah, absolutely.
That is so funny. Now we keep going with our questions. Sean McKernan asks us a wrestling question which regards Angel Cruz among all others. He says Angel Cruz says he's back in OTT but hasn't wrestled since the 8-year anniversary in October. Is he really back? When can we expect to see him?
I think Angel Cruz is like our he's like our Undertaker. He comes back every so often. I'm sure he'll be back at some point. The problem is, I think he's just really busy with his shoot job, so you can't like, if you're going to be a pro wrestler, you can't just duck in and out. It takes so much time. I remember listening to an interview with Tito Ortiz and Rampage Jackson, and they'd both try pro wrestling. I think Tito Ortiz was going to do something with Impact, and he said he just didn't have the time to dedicate to it. It's just so time consuming. There's just so much to learn. It takes so long to become really good at it. And I think that's the deal with Angel Cruz. He just doesn't have the time to get down anymore and train and, put the time into it. And he'd be like me as well. He's not going to do it if he can't do it 100%. So I think that's his issue. Yeah. But I'm sure at one point, maybe the stadium shows, he'll bop back in at some point.
He's just scared of the Sam. And I was saying, mental health question. How much anxiety do you get, if any, from running shows? Have you ever struggled with anxiety?
Funny enough, anxiety is not one that I've ever really struggled with. Maybe before really complicated matches or matches that there's a lot on the line for, a little bit of anxiety. Yeah, because you don't want to mess the match up. But yeah, not really. I mean, I had anxiety when we had the Mox Kingston issues, but again, it's not overpowering for me. I'm able to deal. I'm quite lucky that I've good coping mechanisms with that. It's not something that really affects me all that severely. Touch wood, I've been pretty blessed with that one.
Very good. Martin.
Yep. So,
do you want to ask the last question?
So this one comes from Richie. Now, I know you kind of touched on this topic on the OTT podcast with the Irish Wrestling, but Richie asks, what do you think would need to happen to do a show in the 3 Arena? Like, ideal scenario?
I think it would take a Becky or a Finn Balor. Which who knows? I mean, Finn Balor sent through that video saying maybe sometime I'll see us at some point. So who knows? But I do think that would, that would be what would be needed to kind of do a 3 arena show, which I don't think is out of the realm. It's on the, it's on the kind of major goals at one point, but we'll see how it goes.
And then his mental health question then says, as someone who is on the autism spectrum and has an interest in getting involved in wrestling in some way, be it photography or training to be a wrestler, what advice would you give to me or people like me about getting involved in the business?
Don't let it stop you. There's some top wrestlers that are on the somewhere on the spectrum for sure. I mean, I'm not going to name them. I think some of them have even spoke about it themselves. Some very, very, very talented wrestlers out there that are somewhere on the spectrum. I think that's what adds to their greatness, because they don't have that I'm not good enough aspect, or they don't have limitations. They don't, where we would see that's not possible. They don't have that limitation. That's what makes them great. Some of the funniest people as well in wrestling are somewhere on the spectrum. So don't let it stop you. Yeah, and just go for it. Life is too short to be held back by, oh, I can't. Give it a shot. If you can't, you can't. At least you know. But you know what I mean? Don't let anything hold you back. It's just a perception anyway. At the end of the day, it's just you're holding a perception of yourself. So have a different perception and go for it.
I think it's very funny because when Joe was saying this, I felt a little rush of adrenaline in me, because I was sorry, I had a little brain fart here. I think no, it just every now and then I stop because I have the brain farts. No, becoming serious again. This is a topic that I really like, because I feel like ADHD has impacted my my life so much, and I've only discovered I have it very recently, and it changed my life. And I probably would have sabotaged my whole wrestling career if I knew it beforehand. But I feel so many days I end up thinking that it's I don't like having ADHD. It's a challenge. It's something that's slowing me down and, making my life miserable and difficult and all that stuff. But as Joe said, I think if I didn't have ADHD, I wouldn't have the same level of creativity I have. I wouldn't have the same coping mechanisms, because at the end of the day, wrestling for me personally is a coping mechanism. I use wrestling to I think about wrestling on in my day job. I think about wrestling. I think about how cool would that be if, I made a video with me riding a lawnmower, and I think that's ultimately, I think without ADHD, I wouldn't have had a match at the National Stadium. I own it at 90% to the ADHD aspect, to the fact that yes, it is challenging. Being now neurodivergent can be challenging, because you don't feel part of the flow, if that makes sense. What happens to me more often than not is that it feels like life is flowing in a certain tempo, and I'm outside of that flow, outside of that tempo. But that being outside, once you're able to make it a strength more than a weakness, once you take a second to think about it in a positive way, that can become your strength. You can base your whole strength around the fact that you're on the autism spectrum, you are ADHD, you're neurodivergent, you're depressed, you're sad, you're anxious. That could become something that you can channel all your scars and all your bad in, to then go on and, become great. And
I think it's just
I love
overall. I think it's just overall having a good perspective of yourself and not focusing on what the bad parts are or what you feel they are. It's about focusing on your good strengths. But if you keep focusing on the bad, that's what you become. So I think it's just more putting your focus on the positive as opposed to the bad.
So to reply to Richie, give it a try. Wrestling is great, and I think lots of people, more often than not, you will find a person that has some sorts of anxiety, of neurodivergent past or present, or autism spectrum, or ADHD, or some sorts of it. We wouldn't be creative people, putting on a show for others to be entertained if we didn't have at least something out of place. So, that's probably the best answer. Carmo.
I sadly do not have any more fan questions written down, but I will ask the question of my own. You spoke there about Becky Lynch and obviously doing a 3 arena show. Do you think that we will ever see the likes of like Finn Balor or Becky Lynch or Sheamus or any of those back in OTT?
As I said, like Fergal sent a video through at Christmas saying, hopefully see you guys down the line. So, there's always things bubbling. Who knows? I wouldn't say never say never. I'd say at some point one of them will make an appearance. They all want to give back. They're just so busy at the moment. Like Sheamus is very seldom home, and same with Becky and same with Fergal. Like they're just so busy. But I know if they had the time, they would be. They'd love to jump on board. They've said it to me. So, I don't think it's out of realm. I'm sure it'll happen at some point.
We end up this round of fans question with a few questions that I really like from Johnny McElroy. The wrestling question is, do you feel social media groups such as OTT and Irish wrestling fans can help play a role in the progress of a promotion in terms of advertising and gauging fan opinion and interest?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so important to have a discussion, and it's so important to kind of like, well, who do you think will win? And well, I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is what's going to happen. It just kind of grows interest in the brand and Irish wrestling in general. So sure, yeah, all these groups are kind of helping bring Irish wrestling, more exposure. So yeah, they're amazing. Yeah.
Mental health question. Do you feel there is enough meaningful help available in the health system for people who are struggling with their mental health daily?
I think there could always be more, you know what I mean? But sure, it's just the way it is. But I mean, there is helplines as well that you can use. So I mean, it's not totally hopeless. But I mean, there's always, as I said, there's always more that we can do for sure.
So we're almost about to wrap up this episode. We've been on for a good while now. Before we leave, first things first, thanks to all the fans that have taken the time to ask the questions on the OTT and Irish Wrestling Fans group. Before we go, I have a question myself, and that would be, what suggestions would you give to people in regards to mental health and wrestling? You've been in wrestling for a lot of time. You've been pretty much everywhere. You own OTT and you're in contacts with, big names and such. Is there any advice you can give to people that have started wrestling recently, people that, are about to start wrestling? What's some advice you can give to these people that maybe are adamant or scared to start because maybe their mental health they feel like their mental health cannot allow them to get in and become great and smash it, as they say?
Well, the thing I always say to people who are considering is that everyone goes at their own pace, so you'll never be asked or made do something that you don't feel you can do. It's just don't want that. Everyone goes at their own pace. If you need to step out, you're more than welcome to step out, and give it a try. As I said, the worst thing you can have is regrets. I'm very blessed that I kind of had that mentality from a very young age, that I don't want regrets. So come try it out. I mean, if if you come, a class is 2 hours. If you come for 2 hours and you didn't have a good time in those 2 hours, it's only 2 hours. You know what I mean? And even in those 2 hours, you're even more than welcome to turn around and say, look, can I come down one night and watch a class and see if this is something that I would like to get involved in? I mean, that's the best thing that you can, that's the best offer we can essentially give you. But at the same time, you got to be mentally prepared that the wrestling business is a tough business. It's tough mentally. It's super, super tough physically. You got to be prepared for that. You got to be prepared that it's a long, hard road ahead if you want to become really, really good. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done if you want to become very, very good. You know, sometimes you'll just see people are at it for 5-6 years, and then finally it just clicks. They kind of start to get what wrestling is. They fully comprehend the selling. They comprehend the psychology. So just be aware of it. Like, you know, it's an amazing group of people. Kind of performance. I like to say wrestling's performance art. It is. I mean, it's not a sport. Sport is trying to, you know, compete for an outcome. We're not competing for an outcome. We're performance art. And arts people are kind of, they're amazing to be around. They're just full of energy and they're very creative. So the conversation is usually creative and stuff like that. They're just a good bunch, crazy bunch to be around. So I think, you know, there's the people in general are quite welcoming. We also have a thing in wrestling where, you know, Sam talked about it a while ago about respect being on the banner. Respect is a massive thing in pro wrestling, because if you don't have respect for me, well, then how do I know that you're going to respect me enough to protect me? That when you pick me up, you're going to land me properly with a slam. You're not going to, you know, just recklessly throw me. So that's another element of why respect is on the banner. You should have respect for everybody, respect for the fans. But at the fans, it just doesn't exist. Without, you know, the Macklins, there's no VODs. You know, without the venue managers, there's no venue. You know what I mean? So respect everyone along the way. And just above all, it has to be fun. Like, it stopped being fun for me when I was promoting wrestling and wrestling on the shows. It was no longer fun. So I walked away from the wrestling aspect of it. I'm not going to do something that I find incredibly stressful. I did it at the stadium for 8 years because I thought me and Sam had a good story. But I didn't walk back to the curtain and say, like, that was the most amazing experience of my life. You know what I mean? I had the best. I did, like, it was stressful, but I'm glad I did it because, you know, it was a good story. But it has to be fun. You have to. It's like going to the gym. If you, like I said this to a friend there today, if you don't develop a way to love going to the gym, you're not going to go to the gym. It's just that simple. You're going to quit after 2 weeks. So find a way to love what you're doing. And, you know, if you're not happy doing pro wrestling, don't do it. Another thing as well that I will say, if you're a fan, and I say this to people, if you're a fan and you become a pro wrestler, you have to understand that you're going to stop looking at wrestling in the way that you do as entertainment, because you will be looking at wrestling from a learning aspect. You know, why did that person do that before that move? What was the move they did after that? Rewind that back. I want to see how they did that. Whereas you guys all just watch wrestling to kind of be entertained by it. But as a pro wrestler, you're kind of thinking, like, he's the top wrestler in the world and I want to be a bit more like him. Now I need to study him. So you're actually watching it from a different perspective. And that kind of messes with people as well. Some people kind of don't kind of make that connection, that you won't enjoy wrestling anymore once you're in it. From the same, you'll still get the same kicks of seeing your friends wrestle and stuff like that, but it's now become a job, and you're there to study pro wrestling. And if you want to become good at it, you need to put a lot of work in. So, yeah.
Do you mind if I ask one question,
ladies and
Sam?
gentlemen? Yes.
So I just have...
I'll bite your face later, but...
I'm sorry, don't bite me. So I just have one wrestling question, because I would have kicked myself in the arse if I didn't ask this, because I know for a lot of people, I think someone asked a question a while ago of dream OTT matches, and this one came up, and I was so happy to, because it's my dream match. I know we're in the Sammy D era, he's talked about no imports and stuff, but what are the chances of FTR versus the Kings of the North?
tried it. It's funny because I was in NXT with Dax, like, so I know him quite well. But every time I speak to him, it's just there's just something going on. Like, they were having the contract negotiations a while ago, couldn't happen. Uh, I don't know. And at the time as well, when I was talking to them, they were both very kind of feeling hurt. They wrestled a lot of matches, a lot of tough, especially their style. It's quite a tough style to do. I don't know. I really don't know. I think it would be amazing. But the past few times we've tried to put it together, it hasn't been able to be worked out, unfortunately. But never say never. Always kind of look for a way. So maybe it can happen, but I'm not sure. Just it just hasn't aligned right now at this point.
I'll take the maybe. I'll be happy with the maybe.
It's a definitely maybe.
It's all you, Sam.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was saying, unfortunately, it's time for the bye-byes. Before we say the bye-byes, there are a good few things left to say. First
My
things
watch
first.
is actually telling me to get up and move around, Sam.
What's that?
My watch was telling me to get up and move around.
Right on time, but not after, not before you ate a bit of chocolate.
Yeah,
That's very important.
exactly where I'm going.
And chocolate apart, I was saying, May is Mental Health Month, and today we just spoke about a lot of things mental health related. Please, people, take care about, look after your brains. It's very important. I learned this lesson, further in my life, because I grew up in a context in which mental health was looked, down upon. Mental health wasn't, big enough. You'd had to man up. You'd had to stop crying, stop being a bitch. You'd had to, get your shit together and keep going. I'm trying to promote me and the 5Marks, and today Joe and many other people that I know. We're trying to promote a different vision. Wrestling has changed. Mental health is more now. Wrestlers have more. They're more open. They talk about their problems, but I still feel like people do not talk about problems enough. So don't fear talking about your problems. I'm the first person that talks very openly about the problems, and I feel like that's one of my perks more than one of my downsides. So thank you, Joe, for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joe.
We really appreciate it. You being here, sharing some of your good moments, your bad moments. Some insight that people do not see every day. In that do not imagine what wrestling is. We will keep having people talking about mental health for May. Thanks for to the 5Marks podcast for giving me this little chance of talking about brains, because brains makes us who we are. From the Sam and Joe and the 5Marks podcast, this is all. Remember, weirdness is a blessing. Always remember to be weird at least once a day. Please embrace your weirdness. So from the Sam, your true and weird friend, from Joe, and from the 5Marks podcast, that's all. Thank you.